Pretty good lead into the message this morning. Stained glass masquerade is what we're going to take a look at this morning. Last week we threw it back to 1968. This week we're not going to go near as far back. We're only going to throw back just 3 years ago. 3 years ago, think about 2020 and think about the crazy year that was 2020. And one of the big controversies in 2020, and there were many, is should we wear a mask or not? Was a mask a way to control COVID, or was a mask a way to control the masses? And depending on which side of the political spectrum you lived on, you thought, no, the mask is a way to stop the spread of COVID, or you thought the mask was a way to control the masses. And you know what? I get it. I absolutely hated wearing a mask. It was crazy. Wearing a mask was a pain because if you wear glasses, as Valerie found out this week, as wearing the different masks for the different animals, is that your glasses always were fogging up. You can imagine trying to wear a mask on the bus. I'm sure you experienced this, Cindy, wearing a mask on the bus, and although you don't have glasses, so you didn't have that problem. It's like I'm driving the bus, and if there were kids on the bus, I definitely had the mask on. But when there weren't kids on the bus, I tried to I would open up the windows, and even in the winter, I just drove with the windows down so that I wouldn't have to have a mask on. Because my glasses would just fog up terribly. Now, because of the mask, your nose and mouth were covered, and it was kind of fun because as long as you could hide your facial, you could keep your eyes straight. You could make you could stick your tongue out at someone if you didn't like them particularly. You could make frowny faces with trying to hide that from your eyes. So there were some fun things about that. And last week, as part of Puzzling Puzzles, Valerie and several others wore masks to help us visualize different animals. But we could always tell it was Valerie, even though she tried to disguise her voice. We could always tell it was her. Sometimes we wear masks over our eyes, sometimes over our whole face. And there are times, as I've already mentioned, that it is helpful to wear a mask, especially if you are trying to hide an expression. On the other hand, though, sometimes a mask can be unhelpful because let's face it, we are visual people, are we not? And you can tell what somebody's thinking just by the look on their face. A few weeks ago, I was talking to someone, and while my voice said everything was okay, immediately they picked up on my facial expressions and my body language and said, "Hey, buddy, what's up? What is going on?" I have a terrible poker face, that is for sure. Yes, I cannot play cards because you would know what hand I have. I just have a terrible way of pretending that I know something good or bad is coming. Which brings us to the topic of this morning's message, which we are calling the stained glass masquerade. And the question for us this morning is, what are the masks that we wear to church? I'm not talking about a physical mask. I'm talking about what are the masks that we wear to church. And let's admit from the very beginning that when we come to church, we wear masks. There are details about our lives that we would rather not people know. Just an example. Think of the time someone has greeted you coming to church, and it's not been the best of mornings. Maybe the grandkids were cranky this morning, or maybe somehow you spilt milk all over the kitchen table this morning, or you had a fight with your spouse on the way to church this morning. That never happens, right? Or maybe you kicked your dog and you don't even have a dog. But when you got to church, you got into the parking lot, you composed yourself in the car, and you painted on a smile, and you acted like nothing ever happened, and you walk into church and are greeted, and you put on a brave and smiling face, and you pretend everything's okay. How many of you ever done that? If you didn't raise your hand, you're lying. Or I should say, as I have in my notes, you're probably lying. And the question is why? Why do we put on the mask? Why when we come to church, this very place where it should be a place of authenticity, why do we put on a mask? I saw something really interesting during COVID. It was on Facebook, and it's very sad but true. The question was, it went like some of this. I don't know why some of you are upset about wearing a mask to church because you've been wearing one for years. Whew. Yeah, so true. When we come to church, many times we put on a mask. And we put on we pretend we're smiling, but we're really not. Last Sunday I mentioned that there are those who are seeking spiritually but don't necessarily want to come to church, even though church is the place where they will come and find what they are looking for. I don't always quote country songs in my prayer, but I did. There are people who are looking for love in all the wrong places, and this is the best place to find love. Not only our love, but the love of Jesus. And some people put on the mask when they come to church because they need to hide pain. Some will hide hurt. And some will even put a mask on to hide church hurt. And I can tell you from experience that church hurt is the worst kind of hurt. When you are hurt by someone who you think is a brother and sister in Christ, that can be some of the worst type of hurt. And once you've been hurt, you are much less likely to be vulnerable again, and you will do things to hide the pain. The very place that should be a place of reconciliation and healing is a place where people are wounded and shot down. It was many years ago, back when we were still living in Allentown, that I heard this quote: "The church is the only place you can go where we shoot our wounded." And we as a church, one of the things that we need to make sure of that we're doing is that we're not hurting those who are already in pain. You know what? We don't know what people are going through. We don't know where they've been. We like to try to make judgments that we know where they're going through, or that somehow we know the situation. And back in 2011, I was in need of having to supplement my income at church. And so I went looking for a job with the blessing of the church. They said, "We understand that we're not paying you a full-time salary. So we want you to go ahead and find a part-time job somewhere." And in that process, I ended up at Chick-fil-A. And what's really amazing, I ended up at Chick-fil-A, and I learned all these leadership skills. I'm like, wait a second. I've been a pastor for 20 years, and I haven't learned as many leadership skills as I've learned in my few short years at Chick-fil-A. And so as we would have leadership teams, I was one of the group leaders, and that meant it was my responsibility for taking care of the shift, making sure the right people were in the right places and all that good stuff. And one of the things that we would do is we would have training sessions, and in that training session, we were introduced to this video called "Everyone Has a Story." And this particular video has been updated, and I'm going to show you the new video here. But it was enormously impactful. And as we think about the church and those who are around us, those who come into our building, I thought it would be really good to share with you today. Like I said, that particular video has had a great impact on me over the last 12 years. It made me look at things a different way. Each person needs compassion. We even sing a song that says, everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. Everyone needs a friendly face. Everyone needs grace. And it's still a lesson that I learn just about every day. In case you think your pastor has grace figured out yet, nope, I don't. I still, every day it seems I learn more and more and more about grace. But this much I have learned is that the Lord has been gracious to me, and the graciousness that he has given to me, I need to give to other people. And I desire to be gracious to others. Some people wear a mask to church because they don't want to deal with judgment. Jesus said strong words to the Pharisees because they acted like they had their act all together and everybody else was nothing. Listen to Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why do you worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? Whoa. How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite! First get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Last week, we saw how Jesus dealt with the Pharisees when they brought him the woman caught in adultery. And he said to the Pharisees, they kept pressing him for an answer. And he said to the Pharisees, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Some wear a mask to hide the pain. Some wear a mask to avoid judgment. Still others wear a mask because while on the outside they look like they have their life all together, on the inside nothing could be further from the truth. We think that if we show our true selves that somehow people will think less of us. Let me share with you again that this life that we live is a journey. Are we always going to get it right all of the time? No. Spiritual development takes time. Spiritual growth takes time. And perhaps the reason we feel that we need to have it all together is because we expect others to have it all together. There's this expectation that after we become a believer, that we will never run into another difficulty in all our lives. Matter of fact, at several churches I've had people says, hey, if you're a Christian, you'll never be sick. If your faith is real, you will never have depression. If your faith is real, you will never be disillusioned with the faith. I mean, because after all, there's that verse in the Bible that says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Who of us in today feels like we're perfect? I know I certainly don't feel like I'm perfect. But when we remember that perfect also means to be complete or mature or holy, I'm as complete in Jesus today as I am today, and tomorrow I hope to be more complete in Jesus, because I know that Jesus can transform me more and more and more into this image. And so we struggle with this idea that if perfection is the standard and God is the standard, we'll struggle with that because there's no way to be perfect like God. So we just pretend to be perfect. I'll just put on the mask of perfection and we'll call it good. And yet this mask of perfection, this lack of authenticity is killing the church because we are afraid of what others will think if they find out that we are not the perfect package. Let's face it, we all wear a mask. When we come to church, we wear a mask. Because what if somebody finds out what I'm really like? Jefferson Bethke relates the story. I had just moved in with my aunt and uncle while attending community college and was sitting on their couch about midday, ugly face crying. I was really struggling at that time with a bunch of things: depression, things I'd done wrong, disenchantment, and disillusionment with this whole Jesus following thing. I finally broke and shared all the hurt and pain and ache that I'd been holding on to. It was the first time I had really been honest and taken off my mask. Whether it was friends asking how I was doing and always answering with the cliche, fine, or those dark thoughts I always had, if people knew the real me, they would run as fast as they could in the opposite direction. That's just not something that you feel, all right? That's something even pastors feel. If people knew the real me, they'd run as fast as they could in the opposite direction. He goes on to say, I can't describe the sense of freedom I had when the weights fell off my shoulders in that moment. Taking off the mask, being broken, is essential to this thing called Christianity. In Japanese culture, there is this type of pottery art called kintsugi, and it deals with broken items such as clay pots, vases, and bowls. When a bowl or pot breaks, kintsugi artists put it back together using a lacquer mixed with either gold, silver, or platinum. When the pot is put back together, the gold, silver, or platinum veins running through the pot, exactly where it had previously been broken, are the most eye-catching. This is a very good example of kintsugi artwork. The new glory of the beautiful creation is the golden lace broken pieces have been repaired. With kintsugi, when something becomes broken, it doesn't make it less valuable. The new golden lace repair makes it more valuable. It doesn't try to hide or disguise the imperfection, but instead puts them on full display in all of their beauty and glory. I don't think it's much different when we come to Jesus. Some of the most inspiring people we know are those who have been hurt, who have suffered, or are broken, and yet they still have a peace, joy, and resiliency about them. Scars don't hide our history, they show it. And when we show our scars, we get to a point to the healer who wove his grace right into the depths of every crack and fragment part of our soul. Paul was talking about this with his thorn in the flesh, if we find it in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. And each time God said this, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness." So many times we try to put on this wonderful mask that says, "Oh, I'm so strong." But how does God's power work best? When we are weak, he is strong. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And you know, I said last week that church can be messy. Especially if we take off the masks. Church can even be messier. But this morning I encourage you to take off the mask that hides the hurt, the brokenness, the pain, the lack of perfection, and let the grace of Jesus minister to you. We can be beautiful despite our flaws.